I'm live! Welcome to The Wake. Now, I was all about Friday night posting that I was going to do The Wake live as I was going around the neighborhood of Santa on our fire truck. But what I didn't realize is that when an iPhone gets too cold, it shuts itself off. Yeah. I had two iPhones with me. Those were what I use for my video cameras when I'm doing like stuff when I'm not in front of the computer. And that's actually what John and I use to film our episodes on our iPhones. Anyway, so I'm on top of the truck. I filmed like two things, and then I went to film again, and the camera wasn't working. So that's why I ended up not doing the wake from the top of the fire truck. But don't fret, because we're doing it here. Oh, sorry. Now can you hear me? The weather outside is frightful. All right, so I wanted to go over the movie we watched Friday night. Don't Open No Christmas. First of all, it's English, okay? And you guys know that when you watch some of these English movies, like a lot of the Hammer films and all that, that the English don't think that, topless chicks are that big of a deal, right? And, I mean, if you guys know, right, in England, their daily papers have a page 7 girl who's topless, right? And it's funny, a lot of those page 7 girls went on to become, models and all that kind of stuff. And it's just funny because in Philadelphia, they had a newspaper called the Philadelphia Journal, which was owned by the same people that own the whatever newspaper over in England is that had, I think it's the Daily Mail, that has the girl in it. And they had a page 7, but it wasn't topless, and it was hysterical because it was like every good-looking girl in the Philadelphia area, right? And it didn't go over well in Philly, because in Philadelphia, we're like, even though we're a Democratic town, which is, the liberal side of things, right? Philadelphia is a very conservative town when it comes to like that kind of stuff, sexual stuff. So I just think it was funny, you know what I mean? That the Philadelphia Journal tried to do that. Okay, anyway, so in the movie, right, Christmas movie, they had hookers, they had I forget what they call the girls that sit behind the booth and dance for them. I mean, the performers, right? Erotic performers, you can call them, or whatever, right? And it was just like, really, And the whole gist of the movie is, again, like the week before, you got like, people killing people because of Santa Claus, okay? And it was just a lot of creative kills, I can say that, But yeah, the movie wasn't one of our better presentations, movie-wise. We were funny as hell, but that's us. Yeah, it was just not that great of a movie, And I had a whole bit about it with my Santa Claus suit on. It just didn't work. So, anyway, what I'm doing is, this Friday, we have the movie Elves coming up. And even though I don't have a lot of film of me on the truck doing stuff, a lot of people took videotapes of us in the truck, and I'm going to mesh them in and make the movie like I was on the top of the truck doing it. So hopefully that works out. And that's the movie Elves on Friday with Dan Haggerty. Now, we got a twofer this week, okay? Christmas Eve, we have Santa Claus versus the Martians. Now, if you guys have never seen that movie, right, it's a classic. You have to watch. It's a classic B movie. And it's one of those movies that when they made it to be funny, but now looking back at it, 50 or 60 years it's been, right? The movie's just hysterically bad. I got the one guy who he acts like Mickey Rooney. For years, I thought it was Mickey Rooney, right? They have the bear the guy in the bear costume, which is just a horrible scene. The robot, oh my God. Like the robot's coming after you. If he stepped to the side and maybe walked, it still wouldn't be able to catch you. It was like, hysterical, right? And it stars a young Pia Zadora, who I always go on about, who in the late 70s, 80s, she became real popular. She was a singer. I think she was in a couple of like Broadway shows and things like that. And it's, and you don't know it's her, but it's just funny that somebody that was in that movie, right, became uber famous years later. And God, I mean, she married like some kind of big time like music producer and came out with an album. And the album, I thought the album kind of sucked. She's pleasant on the eyes, but not on the ears, if you know what I'm saying. So anyway, my eggnog. Yes, there's a spritz in it. I like a Southern Comfort eggnog myself. But, so that's what we got coming up this week, Thursday and Friday. I said Elves is just a bad movie. It's got Dan Haggerty in it, Grizzly Adams, and it's called Elves, right? But there's only one monster in it, and he's not even an elf. And it's funny because it's about Nazis and it's, guys, you will laugh at this movie from the beginning to end, and you will feel bad for Dan Haggerty. Of all people, I mean, he went from Grizzly Adams to making these bad horror movies. We saw him so far. We've seen him in 2, Elves, Chilling, and I can't think of the third one we had him in, right? But it's just, you feel bad for him, for somebody that was that good, right? And he was, he was on TV for over 10 years with Grizzly Adams, But just, people got to do things to get a paycheck. They got to feed their kids and pay the mortgage. So, maybe he overspent back in the day. I don't know. I don't know what happened, but it's just funny that he pops up in all those movies. And then the week after that, the day after New Year's Day, that'll finish our Christmas movies, is Chopping Mall. Now, Chopping Mall is not at Christmas, but it's Christmas related because it's at a shopping mall, and it's in the 80s. And if you guys grew up in the 70s and 80s, and you were a teenager in your 20s, the mall was the place to go. It's funny because in my area where I grew up, we had 2 malls that were for us, they were great. But compared to some of these other malls, they were like, like a piss poor shopping center, Like we had this one, I always talk about, it's called the Bazaar, right? Bazaar, not Bizare, right? Which when you go in there, right, it was like the poor man's mall. But it had everything in there you needed. You walked in the door, they had a pretzel place, they had a cinnamon bun place. The place smelled amazing, right? Great pizza place, a little diner in the end where you get really good, like diner meatloaf, right? And the thing was, you would go in there, you get meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and you get a quart of like Ortlieb's or something, which is like the Philly beer. And then they had an arcade, and it was just like all the things in there, and they weren't like a store, it was like a little booth. So it was like an upgrade from between a farmer's market and a mall, right? Then we had this other mall in the neighborhood called the McDade Mall, right? And its anchors were Acme and Woolco, then Kmart, right? After Woolco closed, which was FW Woolworth's big store, and Kmart, which used to be Kresge, right? And that became, Kmart. But to us, it was the perfect mall. Like, great place to go on a date because they had a movie theater, right? They had a place called the Italian Delight, right? Pizza place. They sold really good Italian food, right? And like, they had the bookstore, the record store, the t-shirt shop. They had an arcade for a while, right? And then they had some clothes stores and things like that. But to us, it was perfect. Great place to take a date, right? You could take the date, you go to the Italian Village, you go get something to eat, then you leave there, then you go over to the movie, You know what I mean? And after the movie, you might go back to the Italian village, right? Or even like just walking around the mall. You know, they had the record store, We3 Records. Right? You don't know how many times, because, you know, when you're going on a date and you're in your teenager, early 20s, you want to find out what the person likes. So I go into the record store, and you always do that, and what kind of music you like, and you learn a little bit about it, right? That was the mall experience back in the day. This movie, not that experience. It's about robot. It's sort of like RoboCop combined with like Short Circuit. Okay, it's like these robots go through the mall, right, making sure, and at night so nobody breaks in, right, and they short circuit after they get hit by lightning, and they were just killing everybody, right. Even the guy had the code to turn it off, right. They couldn't turn them off, and it's just hilarity goes through. All of your typical 80s tropes, you know what I mean? Because you have the jock, right? Then you have the rich kid. Then you have the smart kid. Then you have the smart girl who's really religious, whose dad was a Marine, right? And that part of the story was amazing too. You know, you guys, Chopping Mall, fun, guilty pleasure movie. I remember the first time I saw it was I was down the shore, right? And my parents had a house down the shore, and we got down there, and we only got a chance to have it in from October through April, right? We used to rent it out for the summer, so basically May and after Labor Day, we're down there fixing it, because when people rent a place, there's always things get busted, you know. We go down, we fix it. I used to put a coat of paint on the place every couple of years. But anyways, I'm down there with my friends, right? We went down there just for a weekend to go hang out, right? And it snowed down the shore, and we're stuck down there. So I had brought a bunch of movies from the rental, right? And one of them was Chopping Mall. And you got a picture, right? Right, eight people, you know, 4 guys, 4 girls, sitting around in a snowstorm down the shore, a block from the beach. I mean, you could literally look out and you could see the water, and the beach was covered with snow, which was totally cool. Another point, but we watched Chopping Mall. I remember we watched it twice because it was so. I gotta watch this again, kind of thing, you know. And you watch it and you're stepping back into the 80s. It's really fun, you know. But all right, so that's what we got coming up. So let me tell you what it's like being a fire truck Santa. Now, how did I get involved in it? Well, my son Jim, he's a fireman. He works with the hazmat. He works with FEMA, right? He's an EMT. That's his calling in life, and he's great at it. You know, he had told me that they were looking to get a Santa on top of the fire truck. Like, I'd love to do that, you know. So that was in 22. So this is my 4th year doing it, and the first time you do it, like, you in your head, like, this is the coolest thing in the world. Kids are gonna love us, right? And the date, my first time we did it, it was 50 degrees out, so it was beautiful, right? Drive around the neighborhood, you know, and it's beautiful out, you know. I'm the kind of Santa that gets on the truck and I make them sing when I come by their houses and stuff, and we have a good time. Everybody got to give me a ho ho ho, you know. And this was great. And then the last 3 years, right? 1 year it was kind of like misty drizzling all day, right? So on top of the fire truck, in the wind, right? I mean, I wore jeans, 2 pairs of sweats, right? A t-shirt, a sweatshirt, and then the Santa stuff on top of that, right? So it was heavy, right? And when I'm in the firehouse and I have it on, it's hot, you know? So what happened was, I take a couple things off. Then you get outside and you're riding in the truck and you're riding in the wind and it's cold. And I was like, because we get 2 breaks. It's like every 2 hours we take a break, right? And basically, you know, bathroom breaks, and we'll go in and, you know, organize our map to make sure we're doing it the right places and things like that. And it's a blast, right? So last year was the coldest. Last year was the worst, right? This year was really cold, right? It was 20 degrees. I think last year it was in the teens. and very windy, right? This year, right, 23 degrees, right, not a lot of wind, right, and it wasn't that bad. The only thing that was cold on me was my face, you know. But but it's fun. So the first thing you do, you get there. The day starts off. You have to be at the firehouse at 6:30. You know, you get a nice breakfast, right? You know, pastries and coffee and all that. And I won't drink coffee if I'm going to be in the fire truck because you have no idea how hard it is to get that suit off if you have to go to the bathroom quick. I mean, if you guys ever wore a real Santa suit, it's a lot. I mean, between the pants and the boots and the jacket and the belt and the hat and the beard and the wig and it's nuts. So we get there at 6:30 in the morning, right? Have a little breakfast, right? And then we get our stuff on and we get in the truck. So our station has two stations. We have the main station, which was built, 100 years ago. And then we have the new station, which was built probably like 20 years ago. And, and opposite sides of our town. Even though our town only has like 10,000 people in it, right? There's I think it's probably 15 miles square. I mean, it's a big chunk of land. But the thing is, this township basically took all these little farm towns and made it one township. So there's Gallagherville, there's Marshallton, Trimbleville, right? And our town used to be all farms. Now it's like half farmland and half like developments. There's a lot of houses around. I think there was like 6,000 housing units that people live in the town. Anyway, right? So we go to the main station. We're from the main station to the substation, and then I get on the truck and we start driving around. Now by this time it's 8 o'clock in the morning, right? And we get so many complaints. Oh, you come too early, you come too late, this, that, and the other thing, right? We have 5 fire trucks driving around, right, with Santas on it, because that's how big our town is. The one truck they did, because like where my area was mainly the where the developments were, right? We hit 5 developments during the course of the day. 5, yeah. Well, this one, right, our utility, they hit like the south end, right, which was all farmland. They drove 74 miles just around the farmland area for everybody, right? And and it's just funny how our town, on the north side, a lot of the developments got built. Farmers were selling off their land and things like that. And on the south side, right, they didn't, right, which was kind of cool. So, they went 74 miles. I imagine we probably went like maybe 40, but our stuff was a lot more concentrated, But then, we drive around, right, and, I have a megaphone, right, which drove the firemen in the truck, right, my elves, drove them nuts because I was out there and I'm like, give me a ho, 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 right? And the kids had a blast, right? And that's the whole deal, right? And what's really cool is as we go through town, right, and it's a lot different than when I was a kid, but as we're going through town, we, people will give us like, a check, right? Because it's not just it's a day for the kids, right? We're actually out there, we don't ask for donations, but a lot of people give us donations in that day. Because one, we're doing a community service, right? And like I'll do it. If somebody, I think it was the second year that we did it, there was a place that they had a kid that was like really sick. And they asked if I came in. So I came down the truck and I went in, did my thing, right? Ho-ho, and talked to the kid, and he didn't die, thank God, right? But they did move out of the area. I forget where they moved, but I think they went to down Maryland because they did the Mayo Clinic or something down there. But anyway, and I'm talking out of my hat because I'm trying to remember how long ago it was. But we'll do anything, right? Because we're there. It's Christmas, and we're here to help. To provide a service, right? We have a breakfast with Santa, usually the beginning of the month. And then we have it's called Operation Santa at the end of the month. And it's fun to drive around and just see the look on the kids' faces. I remember what it was like when I was a kid, right? seeing Santa Claus come on a fire truck and all, it was cool. But Santa Claus used to come on Christmas Eve in the fire truck in my neighborhood, and he was usually like between 3 and 7, And granted, now in my old neighborhood, it was just neighborhoods, right, all over the place. Like my block, we had like 70 houses, right, and then within 3 blocks are probably 200 houses, in our neighborhood, So when they're driving around, they're hitting a lot of people. And like today, people giving us checks and money, right? Cookies, right? Which was great. Oh my God. Somebody gave us a bag of that Lanier chocolate covered cherries. Oh, it was good. And then somebody made us, it was cranberries, right? And they soak them in 7-Up, right? And then after they soak them in 7-Up, they freeze them and they put powdered sugar on them. Oh my God. They were amazing. I don't know who made them, but they were. You make them for us next year, right? But when I was a kid, right, it's a different world. Like people would be given, cases of beer, a bottle of wine, right? And they would pass up a bottle to Santa of a bottle of bourbon, and Santa would do a shot with everybody, right? That's the way it was back when I was a kid. Different world, right? Drinking is not as glorified as it was back then, because everybody, I come home from work, I have a beer, right? I'm not a whiskey person anymore. I used to be, not anymore, right? But back in the day, right, especially my dad would come home from work, right, make himself a cocktail, right, or just have like some Crown Royal on the rocks, right, and that was it. It was just, that's the way people did it, and it was just funny watching it, or and there's a lot of people that have videos of like the firemen going back in the day, right? And you'd see they pass the bottle up, Santa will go, "Oh, Merry Christmas," do a shot, and pass the bottle back. It's the way it was. But like I said, I got a ton of Christmas cards from the kids for Santa, right? And when I do the show Elf tomorrow night for Friday, I'm gonna read one of them, right? And actually, I'm gonna read a couple of them for my letter of the week at the end. And then this one kid told me a couple Santa jokes. I'm gonna put them in for the joke section. It's gonna be fun. But but then people say to well, it's cold up there. Why do you do it? Why do I do it? When I was a kid, right, the fireman Santa was like the coolest thing in the world. It was, because that told us that Santa was coming. And after Santa came to the neighborhood, right, and it was always cool because we had a couple houses that did the 7 fishes. My mom did the 7 lunch meats, you know what I mean? So you had the Irish and the Italian, right? The Irish families always had the 7 lunch meats. Maybe a crock pot with meatballs in it, But it's always a crock pot with meatballs, crock pot of roast beef, and then your lunch meat, and it was always funny because my mom would always buy something weird, for it, like olive loaf, Because, yeah, and now one year, right, now I love liverwurst, right? She bought liverwurst, right? And she put it out. But what she did was because you get liverwurst slice, you get it in a tube, right? Like tube like that, about that big, right? About that big, that long. You cut it. Well, she sliced it, right? Took it out, molded it on the plate, and told everybody it was pate. Well, technically it is, because pate is liver, ground up liver, and it was the biggest joke in our house all the time. Oh, do you have any of that German pate, But like I said, it was, and then when he came around, right, we were pretty much ushered to bed, and the parents would, still be bopping back and forth between the houses, having a couple drinks, and then when we were asleep, that's when they, took care of the gifts, And I've told the story about my dad and the Barbie swing set a million times, right? I told it at least once on the show, and I believe I told it during Santa Claus and the Martians, but that was one of my funny favorite stories of me growing up with my pop. And my pop, I loved the man, right? But he had a temper, and it could flare off like that when he got mad not at people, right? Mainly at things, because when things didn't work the way he wanted it, right, he was like, ah, you know. I never inherited that. That's me to a degree. I am my father. Anyway, so and then when we get done, right? So we usually get done about 3 or 4. I think we got done about 3 or 4. And at the last house we go to is a house that one of my L's firefighter. Her name's Amy. She's 21. She's my son Jimmy's age. His house is the last house on our route. We always stop it there. And he has cider and stuff. Hold on. Oh, man. Eggnog mustache. And it's fun, because at the end, you know, and we sit around and talk. And I haven't seen the guy in almost a year. He's, you know, his kids were in scouts with me. So, like, we used to do a lot of things together. And it's fun. Then we know we're done. Then from there we go back to the firehouse, you know, and hang up our suits and, you know, look at the cards, and everybody grabs some of the cookies that we got, you know, and we take everything home. Oh, the other thing. Oh God. So this one kid, Dylan, he was one of the firemen, and I can't call them juniors anymore because they're all in their 20s, right? And they've been on my fire engine, or, you know, my sleigh, my Santa sleigh, every year the past 4 years, all of them. You think one year we had Hannah, who was Jimmy's like lifelong best friend. They grew up together since kindergarten, and she's in college, so she wasn't home. And yeah, but pretty much I've had the same crew every year, which is fun because they're, you know, I've watched them grow up. You know, one kid, Brian, he is my older son, and he went through school with him. You know, there's one girl in there. Her name's Padme, right? Great kid, right? And she's a junior fireman. You know, so funny story, and then I'll close. Is when you're on the fire truck, you do get calls, okay? And that was one of the questions that was asked yesterday by one of the families we were talking. And yes, we will get calls. And what happens is, right, you know, I have to come down off my perch, right, because I'm on the top of the fire truck, which is not an easy thing to do, you know. So what I'll do is, last year I kind of like just sat down in the perch till we got to where we had to go, and then I climbed down. Well, the big joke, not a joke, but it's like, you know, fireman's rite of passage. If you're on the crew and you've never done CPR as a fireman, right, and you're at a CPR case, pardon me, you have to perform CPR, right, even if you're in your Santa suit, right? And I'm like, yeah, no way, Don't you know, one kid, right, he's a cop in Westchester, great kid, Turner was his name. He was Santa one year, and he had to do it as Santa, performed in CPR to somebody, and saved their life. But, you know, it's just Merry Christmas, you know. And funny, in the homeland last night, there was a fire in one of the row home neighborhoods, and and they were doing their ride around for Santa, and the Santa with one of the firemen, they went to a fire, and you see a picture of him climbing up the ladder, pulling hose into this fire. So I'll post that on the Facebook page. But I thought that was kind of like, well, you know, got to do what you got to do. So when we went to that call, right, I had done CPR before. I was a lifeguard back in the day, right? But Padme, right, who is maybe 19, she's a student at Pitt, she was the one that never had to, and she was scared. She thought we were kidding, and we're like, no, that's the rule. You got to go. And luckily we got there, and the ambulance was already there, and they had taken care of it, thank God. And the person did live, right? But just the look on her face. What do you mean I got to do it? You know. But and then, like I said, one year we had a call, and it was a brush fire, right? And it was at one of the Christmas tree farms, and we have like 5 Christmas tree farms in our town. Okay, So we went, right, and luckily, like, the other engine and our tanker had gotten there first, right? So we were allowed to leave. But that would have sucked because I'm not a fireman. I'm fire police, right? So I'm on crowd control and traffic control around the situation, make sure the fire, like, no one goes up and bothers the firemen and all that kind of stuff. One drives over the hoses. And trust me, people have done that, right? And when you're doing that, fireman's holding the hose, it stops for a second, right? And then it restarts when the tire gets all the way over it, and it's like poof, and it's dangerous for the firemen because they can get blown back, you know. People don't realize that. You tell them that, and the next thing you know, they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm good," and then they just don't listen to your orders, and they do it. You know, somebody can get hurt. But I was like, what am I going to have to do, right? And I would have been helping them pull hose out, you know, for this fire. And what happens is that you get mulch fires. You guys know what mulch fires are. You know, most of the time in the spring, the mulches move so fast that it doesn't get a chance to, like, incinerate itself. But when it incinerates itself and then starts smoking, on the inside, it's a huge hot fireball, you know, because it's how the chemicals work. And I'm no scientist, right? But and when you go to put it out, right, you have to soak it, and I mean soak it to the bone, you know, make sure you get the fire out. And we actually have one at one of our farms that they have like sort of a dumping area where they put all the wood and the wood chips, right? And then what they do is, because mulch has to, like, fester, you know. And that was a fire. It was on Super Bowl like 3 or 4 years ago, Super Bowl weekend. And my son, right, who was a junior at the time, he wasn't 18 yet, he was there like the whole weekend until 11 o'clock at night, because he's not allowed to work past 11 as a fireman, as a junior. And he missed the Super Bowl that year. I forget who played it. The Eagles weren't in it, Packers weren't in it. You know, it was probably the Patriots, you know, or the Chiefs. I hate both. But yeah. So you know, thank God we didn't have to go to that. But that's, you know, when you're doing that service, right? People can complain that it was freezing cold, and it was, right? But I have so much fun, and the kids love it, and just the look on the kids' faces when Santa comes down the block. Kids are jumping up and down. Kids are crying because they're, like, so emotional, like, oh my God, it's Santa, you know. And you know, my job, you know, most of the other Santas just stand up there and wave and yell ho ho. Like, I like to interact with people, so I have the megaphone. I'm like, hey, Merry Christmas, and you know, give me a ho ho ho, and were you a good kid? You know, and it's funny, a friend of mine, well, a guy I know in the neighborhood, he's a cantor at our church. He has a beautiful voice, and I'm a Santa. He didn't know it was me, and I'm like, hey, Santa, or hey, sir, do you sing at St. Joe's Church? He goes, yes, I do. He said, I'm getting you a voice for Christmas, right? And he looked at me. His wife was hysterical. He looked at me like he was going to punch me, and I'm like, it's me. And I couldn't pull my beard down because there was all these other kids, and they, like, running around. So I couldn't, like, you know, hey, this is me, you know. So I'm hoping I bump into him at church and tell him it was me so he doesn't get mad, you know. But, well, that's it. That's the wake. That's my chit chat. Let you know what's going on with me, going on with the show, and all that. So, guys, I'm going to go decorate my tree. After I finish my Southern eggnog. And just want to wish everybody, because Yule, this is Yule, so it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? Today, the 21st, is Yule. Is the holiday that my people celebrate. And, you know, it's the same as Christmas. You know, we celebrate Christmas also, because I have to go with my wife, Helga's, you know, Catholic tradition. But it's a time of year where everybody, you know, and I'll quote Bill Murray from Scrooge, is a little nicer to everybody, right? Everybody, you know, kind of ignores other people's, you know, faults. right? And you just want to, you want to give, you know. And that's just, and if you ever watched Scrooge, his speech at the end, like that's a great Christmas speech. So, all right, guys. So I'm gonna go up. I'm gonna turn whatever football games are on. I'm gonna decorate the tree, and then, guys, I want you all to have a wonderful Christmas week. Right? I'll be back next Saturday, and I'll be doing a double wake, right? One for Santa Claus and the Martians, and I might just, if I can find the wake I did last year, maybe I'll just post that one. And then we're gonna have elves on Friday. All right, guys, have a wonderful, wonderful Christmas, right? And I hope that you guys get everything you want. You know, all I want is presents, meaning the presence of my kids, that they're there. You know, I'm 62. What do I need? Socks and underwear. But that's the deal. And a lot of you guys out there, right? If you're younger and your parents are still around, that's all they want for Christmas either, right? They just want you to be there. Right? They ain't gonna cry. But anyway, Merry Christmas, Happy Yule, right? Happy Hanukkah. Did he say Happy Kwanzaa, Merry Kwanzaa? I don't know. And all the other holidays around this time of the year, right? And remember, give somebody a hug, right? And also remember your ancestors, because you, my friend, are a product of 1,000 loves, and they're the ones that got you here. Merry Christmas. And how do I turn this stupid